Over the past week, I've been researching elk movement with a thermal drone. This isn't something I've ever seen documented before. Trust me, I've looked everywhere. My buddies keep asking me, why are you taking days away from elk hunting and spending it flying a thermal drone? And here's the brutal truth. 2 years ago, I was such a spectacular failure on my September archery hunt that I'm pretty sure I went through some bouts of hunting PTSD. I'm talking the kind of failure that makes you question everything you thought you knew about hunting. The kind that haunts your dreams when you're thinking about bugles and it turns out to be other hunters. Now first, I need to set the record straight with a disclaimer. The unit that I'm researching the drone with isn't the same one where I had my elk tag on this year. I did go on a September archery backcountry hunt. I saw plenty of elk. I never let an arrow fly. But I've had a hunt from 2 years ago that's still just absolutely burning deep inside of me, and I had to understand what could I have done differently. GPS collar studies track specific elk across massive landscapes, which is great for science, but that's not always practical for hunters. With elk hunting success rates barely scraping 10%, most of us aren't picky about trophy bulls. Any elk is a trophy when it's on your back and you're packing it out. So I grabbed my Matrice 4T to uncover real, actionable patterns that could help me and you avoid another season of tag soup and wounded pride. I learned a lot during this research. I busted some myths, and I'm going to walk you through the journey. Stick with me, and I've got 5 key takeaways that might save you from a kind of humbling experience that I have. Misery loves company. So what is your worst elk hunting failure? Drop it in the comments below. Picture this hunting nightmare. September archery season 2 years ago. I'm a wide-eyed elk hunting rookie sold on the road hunting strategy, which is there's thousands of acres of national forest with roads crisscrossing them everywhere, and statistically there's as many elk shot out of these units as some of the other ones. So I loaded up my Jeep with the confidence of a man who had never been humbled by an elk, trying to channel my southern turkey hunting roots, get up high before dawn, listen for that magical bugle, and move in. And it didn't work. I glassed until my eyes burned. I sat up on these edges, adjusted my game plan, went to the edges of private, which is where everybody said they were. I went to the biggest blocks of timbers with no roads. I didn't find them. I was everywhere until one day, finally, I hear the bugles. I'm about a half a mile away from private. I hear the bugles. They're responding back and forth. They're moving. I'm sliding in there. Everything. All of this is coming together. All this patience. This is going to work. Except it wasn't an elk. It was another hunter on private land bugling back at me. The crushing realization that I had had a passionate conversation calling with another human while actual elk were someplace laughing at us broke me. I ended up with tag soup so bland it could star in a country song about hunting failures. But what more than that is I'm left with the questions that kept gnawing at me. What was I missing? Where were the elk actually spending their time? How could I hunt smarter instead of harder? Like, what could I actually do? Am I the only person to ever live that hunting nightmare where they moved in on a hunter calling at them? Entered the thermal drone, specifically the Matrice 4T, that would become my window into the secret life of the elk. I know what you're thinking, drones and hunting, that's cheating, but hold on. I'm not using this to hunt. I'm using this for research to understand the patterns that might make me a smarter hunter when I'm back on the ground with my bow. The beauty of the thermal imaging is that it reveals what our eyes can't see. And while GPS collar studies follow individual animals across vast territories, like watching a single actor in a massive play, thermal drones let you see the entire cast in real time. You can watch bedding density, see how elk use edge habitats, observe their reaction to the weather changes, how they handle thermals, figure out where they actually spend their time or where they don't spend their time. I set some strict rules for this research. No flying over private property, no flying over houses, and absolutely not using this technology in a unit that I was hunting in. or had a tag for. This was pure research, helped make me a better hunter through understanding, not through technological advantage in the field. The question that drove me nuts was simple. Could this thermal eye in the sky reveal the secrets that cost me dearly 2 years ago? Armed with my Matrice 4T and several batteries allowing for nearly constant flight time, I set out on what would become days upon days of methodical searching. I'm talking hours and hours of flight time, covering terrain that would take weeks to scout on foot. My first target looked like an elk paradise from the air, a picture-perfect, ideal complex of food. It did not have so much canopy that would block the thermal signatures, but this should be a slam dunk feeding area, the kind of place that elk would be lined up to eat, waiting for the dinner bell. And absolutely nothing, not even a suspicious heat blob. I kept searching in the methodical grid-like pattern, expanding my country, looking for the elk into the dark timber near these areas, the thick, gnarly stuff that makes you wonder if elk have a supernatural sixth sense and a supernatural stealth ability. And here's the thing, it's not like the mountains were empty of life. I spotted a great mule deer buck moving through this timber. You can see how perfectly the animals pop on the thermal screens when the conditions were right. I had overcast skies, and animals would light up, mule deer at least. I found several moose
hiding near some water,
but elk, nothing. I kept flying the methodical grid patterns. I'm talking about thoroughness here, overlapping search patterns, varying the times of days. My eyes were glued to the screen for so long that I started seeing heat signatures in my sleep. At night, I picked up some thermal images, but without being able to use a spotlight, I couldn't tell or confirm what species they were, but the size of them identified that this was likely a group of elk. Overcast September days provided stable thermal conditions, giving me extended flight windows that I used to cover thousands upon thousands of acres. After what felt like searching half of the Rocky Mountains, I'm talking about legitimate coverage of massive terrain, I finally saw something that made my heart skip a beat. There it was, a lone cow elk standing in the timber, making its way through. I'd finally found something real. There actually are elk on this property, and it's on public, not on private. About time. This is it. But the questions started flooding in. Now, where are the rest of them? This is a lone cow elk. Where are the big guys? There can't just be one cow elk running around here. There's got to be more. So I immediately started running detailed search patterns around her, tight spirals, expanding circles, systematic coverage of every piece of cover within a reasonable distance. I was convinced that where there's one elk, there's got to be more. But after extensive searching around the cow, I came up with nothing, not an additional heat signature. Everyone I talked to before starting this kept saying the elk have moved into small pockets of private land, and that's where they're hiding. So I decided to investigate this theory. Staying over public land, completely legal, I skirted private land boundaries, looking over into the private, checking the edges, flying around them to see if there was any evidence to support this widely believed theory. Zero. Nothing. No thermal signatures. Elk were not camping out in some private refugee like they rented a vacation cabin. But what I did find is about a half a mile away from that lone cow, at a slightly higher elevation, I spotted something that got my pulse racing. A lone bull with a few cows. This was awesome. Absolutely great to find. The grid searching is working, I thought. There really are elk here. This group looked settled, comfortable, and not spooked or pressured. They were just living their best elk lives. By the end of my research, I found a third group of younger bulls and cows, and even witnessed some sparring action that looked like they were auditioning for a nature documentary. My Matrice 4T was finally earning its keep after days of searching. It was starting to feel like I might actually understand where the elk were spending their time, and more importantly, where they don't. After all this research, after days of flying and hours of analysis, there are 5 key insights that would have saved me from that soul-crushing tag soup experience 2 years ago. More importantly, this could be the difference between packing out and eating elk steak and having tag soup. Takeaway number 1, the private land myth is busted. And I'm not saying this is everywhere, but on this unit, everyone's saying that elk were chilling in these tiny pockets of private like they had spa reservation. My systematic searching of the private areas did not support this. Don't waste your precious time obsessing over private land boundaries. Focus your energy on public land, fresh sign, rubs, dropping that actually indicate elk presence. Takeaway number 2, the big roadless areas does not mean that it's automatically an elk paradise. Those vast, untouched wilderness blocks that look perfect on paper can be deader than my social life during hunting season. Just because an area is roadless does not mean it's holding elk. If a roadless area doesn't show up fresh sign, no vocalization, no recent activities, don't waste days there. Cut your losses and relocate. Takeaway number 3, when you find one elk, you're likely to find the party. What I saw on the thermal drone is every time that I spotted a single elk, there were others within a half a mile of that. They were not necessarily scattered across drainages here and there and everywhere, but they were kind of in a herd, even though they weren't all tightly together. So when you find fresh sign or spot an elk, realize that there's likely some other elk in the area and stay close to that. Takeaway number 4, realize that there are vast, abandoned dead zones of elk. Huge chunks of land that have absolutely zero elk. But there are other areas of land where there are a lot of elk. You may have a 5 square mile area with 0 elk and another 1 square mile area where you end up with 15 elk. So understanding that fact about elk hunting can help you target your fresh sign, finding the fresh areas in which the elk actually are. And when you find one elk, realize there's likely other elk in that area. Takeaway number 5, elk love the all-in-one exclusive package. The elk I found were consistently in spots with food, water, and cover and shade were all available in a very short distance, not spread across some massive drainage. So target spots where elk can eat, drink, and hide without having to travel a massive distance. Yes, they will travel a massive distance, but that doesn't mean that you need to be searching that massive distance all the time for them. And hunting pressure may just bump them around over there. What aspect of elk hunting would you like to see studied with a thermal drone? Drop that in the comments below. If you like this content and I deserve a like, please like and subscribe. It'll help me out. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.